October 7th meeting of the Transportation Environment Committee. Let's start with roll call, please.
Candelas?
Here.
Ortiz?
Present.
Foley?
Here.
Vice Chair Davis?
Here.
Chair Cohen?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Going to start with our review of work plan. We have two items that have been deferred, one by rules, but we have to vote to defer the San Jose Power Status Report from October to December 2nd. Do we have any public comment on orders of the day?
We have no public comment.
Okay. Do we have a motion to accept the work plan?
So moved.
Second.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. Okay. It's been approved. We have nothing on consent today, so we'll start with our first report, which is our Climate Smart San Jose Semi-Annual Report. And it looks like Zach and Julie are going to do the report for us today. And team, welcome.
Well, now they got this, so you're fine.
Good afternoon. Lori couldn't make it today, so I'm covering. I wanted to first start off by introducing myself. My name is Julie Benavente. I'm the Deputy Director for our Climate Smart Division and Environmental Services. And I'm also joined by staff in the Department of Transportation, our Environmental Services staff, and also the Energy Department. So Andrea and Kate are here with me today. And we're going to be presenting the Climate Smart Semi-Annual Update, which will also be returning to Council on October 29th with that update. And I think it's important to remember that we are reminded on a daily basis, both in things that we see in the news in terms of the weather and scientific reports, that climate change is important for us to address. And we're happy to be here today to be talking about some of the critical climate work that the city has completed and has underway for the March through August 2024 reporting period. And I'm going to pass to Ann to kick us off.
Hi, good afternoon. All right, today we will give a quick background on Climate Smart. We'll provide updates on the Climate Smart core activities, community engagement, and programs and policies, and we will look at what we have in the works on the horizon. The Climate Smart San Jose Plan was approved in 2018, and City Council declared a climate emergency in 2019. Recognizing the urgency of climate change, City Council adopted a resolution setting a carbon neutrality by 2030 goal in November of 2021. In June 2022, Council adopted the Pathway to Carbon Neutrality by 2030 plan, identifying 4 key strategies: zero emission vehicles, reducing vehicle miles traveled by 20%, switching our appliances from fossil fuels to electric, and carbon neutral electricity. Environmental Services staff lead, facilitate, and/or support climate mitigation initiatives across departments citywide. Climate Smart staff collaborate across city divisions and departments to track and pursue private, state, and federal funding opportunities to support Climate Smart initiatives. The table shown provides a summary of Climate Smart external resource acquisition in the reporting period and total to date for fiscal year 24-25. The city received over $6 million in funding for Climate Smart initiatives in the reporting period, with over $1.1 million in fiscal year 24-25 thus far. Total funding awarded from granting agencies thus far in fiscal year 24-25 includes support for initiatives to further transit-oriented communities, provide bike education and programming, and expand bike share. City staff directly applied for an additional over $18 million in external funding in this reporting period, with several award negotiations or notices pending. City staff are also planning to submit applications for over $18 million in funding for Climate Smart initiatives in the next reporting period. Additional core activities in the reporting period included, in March 2024, the Climate Advisory Commission held its first meeting, followed by meetings in May and July. The Commission approved a fiscal year 24-25 work plan and an annual report for fiscal year 23-24. With City Council adoption of the 2024-2025 operating budget, the Planner 4 position previously housed in the Environmental Services Department Climate Smart Division moved to the Energy Department to align with funding and topic coverage by the Energy Department and to continue to support climate smart initiatives. Highlights of the Climate Smart community outreach and engagement across city departments includes hiring a cultural strategist in the Climate Art Program run by the Office of Cultural Affairs to start the Carbon Neutral Creative Network and map out a strategy aligning the arts and culture sector with the Climate Smart program. And recruiting 15 San Jose artists from environmentally impacted communities to provide an economic opportunity to develop environmental resilient leadership skills. The Energy Department sponsoring an EV ride and drive event and launching an EV shopping tool. The Environmental Services Department hosting 5 building electrification webinars, 2 of which were held in Spanish and Vietnamese with viewing parties. And now I'm going to pass it to Andrea for transportation updates.
Thank you. DOT is planning and implementing key multimodal projects while actively seeking funding to support efforts that reduce motor vehicle travel in San Jose. DOT staff secured $6.2 million in grant funding this reporting period to implement bikeway, share mobility, and complete street projects. This includes $5.2 million for the East San Jose Equity Mobility Project, an engagement and education initiative in collaboration with community-based organizations in the East Side. The project is expected to be launched by the end of 2024 and includes bike education and apprenticeship programs, an e-bike program, a mobility wallet program to help
Excuse me, can you just make sure the mic's close enough because we can't, or speak up a little louder.
Sorry.
We're having a little trouble hearing.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Perfect. The project is expected to launch by end of 2024 and includes bike education and apprenticeship programs, an e-bike program, a mobility wallet program to help people in need to pay for transportation, and support for Viva Calle. In regard to ongoing key projects, DOT staff is actively working on complete street and bike share expansion along the King Story corridor and plans to add new bike share stations and e-bikes in East San Jose. Additionally, micromobility hubs are being planned for San Fernando Street in downtown. These efforts are in coordination with multiple partners like Lyft and the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. This reporting period, DOT staff also kicked off the outreach and engagement phase for the North San Jose Multimodal Transportation Improvement Plan, or Connect North San Jose. The plan focuses on improving the safety and convenience for using transit and active modes such as walking or biking, while reducing solo driving and car miles traveled. This planning effort is expected to continue through mid-2025, and its implementation will support sustainable growth in North San Jose. DOT staff will continue to pursue funding and partnerships to achieve a significant reduction in motor vehicle travel in San Jose in support of climate smart goals. And now I give it to Kate. Thank you.
Thank you. So with regard to zero-emission vehicles, through the California Vehicle Infrastructure Project Rebate Program, participants installed 140 level 2 and 29 fast chargers to date at multifamily workplaces and public places. This includes 5 more fast charging ports during the reporting period. Energy Department staff have continued electric vehicle education in partnership with community-based organizations, including hosting a ride and drive with Breathe California in May. Staff also published new electric vehicle web pages at sanjosecleanenergy.org/EV that includes a shopping tool that allows customers to compare the lifetime costs and emissions of any electric or gas-powered vehicle. Finally, staff kicked off a needs assessment focused on understanding the transportation needs of residents and how San Jose Clean Energy programs can assist and incentivize electric options. This includes outreach at events, focus groups, and an online survey. In 2024, San Jose Clean Energy customers are receiving 60% renewable energy at lower rates than PG&E. And SJC continues to invest in new renewable and reliability resources. So far, SJC has contracted for more than 850 megawatts of resources. and we are on track to offer 100% carbon neutral energy as a base offering by 2030. San Jose Clean Energy also has 2 programs that incentivize customers to use energy when the grid is cleaner. So we expanded our demand response program, Peak Rewards, to residential customers. This program pays customers to reduce their energy usage during energy-saving events, typically on hot evenings in the summer. And we also launched our residential super off-peak rate pilot to about 1,800 customers. And qualifying customers have lower electricity rates from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. every day. Moving on to building electrification. Starting with energy efficiency, the Energy Department is running 2 energy efficiency programs that will end this quarter. Our residential program offers discounts on home appliances and free energy-saving devices to income-qualified customers. This program had huge growth over the reporting period. Customers purchased 230 appliances and ordered nearly 1,000 energy-saving items. Our commercial program has provided rebates on HVAC and refrigeration improvements to 775 businesses. On workforce development, we continue to work with an industry consultant and meet with labor stakeholders to research the current state of the electrification workforce in San Jose, training program needs, and the workforce size needed to meet the Bay Area Air Quality Management District's zero NOx regulations. This analysis and stakeholder interviews will feed into our recommendations for workforce development programs that will be brought for council consideration in February 2025. And then finally, we are working to launch a heat pump incentive program and on-bill financing pilot program for residential customers expected mid-November. And we selected the Sacramento Municipal Utility District to implement the incentive program. And I'll now pass it back to Ann.
Thank you. That's okay. Also, for building electrification, in support of building electrification, ESD launched Electric Homes San Jose, a residential building electrification incentive program on Earth Day, April 22nd, 2024. 50% of funds in the program are designated for equity communities. As of May 2024, available funding for incentives was fully reserved. Reserved funding is for over 100 planned building energy efficiency and electrification measures. Implementing the second year of beyond benchmarking requirements, staff will close out compliance in November 2024. 15 municipal buildings are out of compliance. Public Works intends to continue to submit budget requests to cover city compliance activities. Looking ahead, Climate Smart has several items expected to reach milestones in the next reporting period, as noted on this slide, and there are several items for City Council consideration, also noted at the bottom of this slide. And with that, staff recommends accepting this semi-annual report on the Climate Smart San Jose plan from March through August 2024, and recommending this item for full council consideration at the October 29th, 2024 City Council meeting. And we'd like to now open for questions.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the thorough report. Let's start and see if we have any members of the public.
We have one speaker card submitted for Diane Solomon. Please make your way down to the podium. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Here on behalf of your Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. First, we appreciate and support our city's Climate Smart Plans initiative. Last year, we were especially pleased to see on the October 23rd Climate Smart San Jose Plan report the inclusion of Bike Plan 2025 and the bike share service expansion. Although bike share service expansion was specified on last year's and we see it on this year's, we hope you will improve it this year. Today, I can tell you that other than 3 stations near Berryessa BART, we noticed no meaningful bike share services on San Jose's east side. There's no share sites shown at Eastridge Shopping Center, San Jose City College, Evergreen Valley College, or San Jose's underserved south side. We ask our city to remedy this, and we hope that you'll improve it immeasurably this fiscal year. Second, we hope you'll prioritize the Transit First initiatives and implementation of Bike Plan 2025, which align with this plan. And third, maybe it kind of fits with this, please continue to remove parking spaces where it's possible and practical to encourage greener forms of transportation within our city. This aligns with our city's Transit First, Bike Plan 2025 initiatives and this plan's ultimate goal. And Ultimately, we ask you to continue to work to decrease vehicle miles traveled within our city by prioritizing the build out of the bike network and making this network's funding a priority, as well as expanding the bike share program. Thank you for your consideration, and thank you so much for making San Jose a great place to live.
Thank you, and back to the committee.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the public comment. Now we're back to committee for questions and comments. We'll start with Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you, Chairman. First off, I just want to thank city staff for their very thorough and in-depth presentation. Really enjoyed the work that's being done, specifically in this project around Climate Smart. I'm excited to see the proposed workforce development program from San Jose Clean Energy. I think that's going to be a great opportunity to upskill existing workforce here in the city of San Jose. And I especially want to reference just how you're going to be prioritizing those who work in the natural gas industry. It's very important that as we move into making decisions based on the climate, that we don't just abandon our former workforce and those who may have built their career in formerly, installing gas-powered, systems. They make for an eligible workforce for this new system as well. So I'm glad that we're not just abandoning those workers who got us where we are, but we're making sure that they can find work in the future as well. I also appreciate the grant to expand bike shares in the east side of San Jose. I've been involved in a few different conversations. I know that we're working with the Bicycle Coalition and other partners to raise awareness about that. And I just wanted to ask, is there a timeline or next steps in the bike share expansion to King Corridor?
I'm not 100% sure about the timeline for implementation. I know staff at this stage is looking at site alternatives for installing, I believe, 37 new bike share stations on the east side. Yeah. So there are some constraints in terms of space and in terms of, where would be the most suitable spaces to add those bike share stations. So I think the conversation in coordination with LIFT and MTC is around placement of the stations, but I can get back to you with a timeline.
No, that'd be great. I'm assuming we're looking at libraries, community centers, and things like that. I know that that's where our community gathers, so that would be excellent. Of course, along corridors like Alum Rock or Story Road, where people frequent up and down. I think those would be great placements as well. And then finally, I know in previous meetings regarding this topic, one of my major concerns was that there wasn't enough charging infrastructure on the east side, especially, which was a deterrent for individuals who want to buy a Tesla or other energy vehicles. I do just want to mention on the record that we are seeing a change of tide in that. I'm seeing individuals in multiple parking lots and multiple shopping centers on the east side building this infrastructure, and I'm really excited about that because that allows clean energy vehicles to be accessible to everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and I assume as we're looking for rideshare places, obviously we're looking at transit hubs like along Alum Rock and at the BART station and places like that where people will be able to access e-bikes and shares. Yeah, the Alamo Transit Center in particular. I don't know if that's a question, I'm just commenting. Okay, I don't see any other hands. I have a few questions I'll ask. So first question, and of course there's a lot more detail in the background information that I read before the meeting, so I'm going to ask questions that weren't necessarily presented in here. But first, I'll start with that the climate art program that you mentioned. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And I saw something in the notes about a climate art symposium coming up. Do you have any details about that and how one can participate?
So that program is run through the Office of Cultural Affairs, and unfortunately I don't have additional details other than what we provided in the memo, but we can provide additional information following this. I have seen invitations for the symposium that's happening, and so I'm sure we can get some more details for you.
I guess we'll try to figure it out on our end where and when that's happening. So the idea there is that people are going to be using art as a way to promote being more thoughtful about their energy use and tying that into our programs to try to get people electrified. Is that sort of the purpose of the climate art program?
So the program is focused more so on the actual institutions, so like the art locations in the city, the buildings themselves, where artists are showing their work, and then also the practices that the artists are undertaking. So like the types of materials and how they manage the materials or the waste that may come from that process. So that's more of the focus than, say, using art as educational, yeah.
Oh, I see, okay, thank you. A couple of the programs that you have, like the Electric Home Tour and the Climate Smart Challenge, there's a small number of people who participate in those. What are we thinking about in terms of trying to expand the reach of those programs and get more people involved?
Yeah, I'll let Kate talk about the Electric Homes the tour, and in terms of the challenge itself, we started it as a pilot. We've had a couple of different cohorts now going through. We've been trying different methods to try to engage more people. So I think we started originally, with just individuals. Then we kind of went into more like organizations and trying to get those organizations engaged, and as well as the people participating in those organizations. And then we've been working with some schools as well. So we're kind of thinking to maybe head more into the school work and really trying to engage more youth in this upcoming cohorts that we're working with.
Okay. Thank you for that. The city is funding a number of incentives for people to convert appliances, electrify their homes, put in EV chargers, et cetera. I see the Electric Home San Jose program is fully subscribed in terms of the number of people who want to take advantage of funding. It even has a backlog. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of people are asking for help, what kind of help they're asking for, and whether we think we might need to expand that program given the strong interest we're seeing?
Yeah, I think, luckily, San Jose Clean Energy will have their incentive program coming out just as kind of the other one is closing up. So it was a nice in-between and sort of a learning experience to some degree as well. But the Electric Home San Jose program, it was obviously residential focused, but we actually had several multifamily buildings participating, and some that have completed their projects already. So it was some of the larger multifamily. And as we mentioned, we're focused on trying to have projects in equity communities. And I think at the first, for the 119,000 that we had reserved, I think 70% was going towards equity communities, so homes that were in designated equity communities. So we're really happy about that. We're just looking to close up those projects. We want to see those completed. And of course, there is a wait list, so there's more that it either will complete through this program or through the forthcoming program that San Jose Clean Energy will have. And I don't know if Kate, you want to talk a little bit about that tour, and then also maybe
Oh, sure. So going back to your question before about the Electric Homes Tour, San Jose Clean Energy is going through a marketing plan right now to promote that to residential customers. And that's for attending the tour. We also promoted it to customers to be hosts in San Jose, but had pretty low uptake still. So we'll be working on refining that for future years. On our heat pump incentive program from San Jose Clean Energy, we expect that to launch in mid-November. We will offer rebates on heat pump HVAC systems, heat pump water heaters, insulation to accompany the heat pump HVAC projects, and different incentives for pre-wiring. So for example, if you install a heat pump water heater, we will offer a rebate for a customer to pre-wire a future induction cooktop or HVAC system while the electrician is already in.
That's really exciting. Thank you so much. I'm really glad to hear that that's being fully utilized, and we're actually offering the resources that we said we were. People were taking us up on it. Also, really great that 70% are in equity communities. We've often had this, I think, misperception that this is only going to be certain people who are, with means who are going to upgrade, and everyone else is going to be left behind. But I'm really glad that we're seeing there's strong interest everywhere in the city to do the right thing to electrify. Councilmember Ortiz will attest to that. People want electric vehicles. They just need to have the infrastructure to do so. And we begin to offer it. The uptake I think will be significant. So kudos to the team for that. Let's see, what else I want to ask about. To the EV, so now the Reach Code EV, there's a little section in the report about the study that's being done to try to implement what we asked for in terms of the multifamily EV Reach Code. It was hard to tell from the notes exactly where we are, what the conclusions are of staff as far as the right approach moving forward. Can you summarize that a little bit?
Thank you. So the REACH code required or did not require direct wiring to units, but we continue to work with PG&E and other stakeholders on the development of a sub-metered option that would allow multifamily residents to be able to take advantage of lower electricity rates for EVs or their low-income discounts called Karen Farah without requiring direct wiring. We also conducted a small study, sampling, I believe, more than 40 multifamily properties around the city who have EV charging, and looking at the rates being charged, EV charging rates being charged to customers, and found that there wasn't overcharging of customers. They were in line with PG&E residential electricity rates, but this is something we want to continue to review multiple times a year just to make sure.
Okay, great. I really appreciate that, and that's good news. You know, as I read the report, I noticed the very last sentence of it, there's a whole lot in there about what you just talked about, and the last sentence says, it's important to note that an EV still may have a lower operational cost per year for a resident than a gas car. To me, that's kind of the lead item, and it's the last sentence in the entire document instead. I think we often tend to focus our reviews and reports on the challenges and hurdles and things that we're concerned about, and sometimes I worry we're trying to make perfect be the enemy of the good, and when the lead should still be, this is clearly a benefit to people, giving them access. The idea that we would potentially hold back on giving access on a system that provides access to everyone because we're worried about some imbalances in cost concerns me, especially given that we know that it will be financially beneficial for people and better for our city and environment if people convert. So I just want to make sure maybe that we think as we present these things in the future that we often lead with the benefits in our reports and then talk about the hurdles we have to overcome rather than kind of present these reports in a way that often looks like we're hesitant to do something and then at the end says, oh, by the way, we do still know this is good, right? Because I think people often look and don't necessarily get to the end when they look at these reports. So just kind of a comment there. And the last question I have about using Sacramento to implement our heat pump, how does that work? We're providing rebates through clean energy. They just have a program they've already built, so we're just kind of piggybacking on their program?
So the Sacramento Municipal Utility District is like the city of Santa Clara, where they are a full electricity provider for generation distribution. They also have an arm where they provide program implementation services to CCAs. And they're very experienced in that, and so they take the learnings from the programs they offer their own customers and apply them here in the Bay Area.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I don't see any other hands up, so do we have a motion to accept the report?
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded, so let's vote. Great, the motion carries 5-0, and thank you all for the great work, and look forward to the next report in a few weeks at council. Okay, we're on to our vehicle concerns and service improvement status report. We know that this item never generates any comment, so this one should be quick. We'll bring John down to kick us off.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. John Risso, Director of Transportation. We are here with Arian Collin, Division Manager, DOT, and Namrata Batra Agarwal with Projects and Products Manager with ITD, and we're here to discuss and give you a status on our vehicle concerns program and project we've been working on. This is actually our fourth status update for the project, and as mentioned in our June update, we did successfully launch the new 311 vehicle concerns application enhancements in March of that year. And the vehicle concerns remains the most requested service on San Jose 311. Today's presentation will cover recent service improvements and highlight the key enhancements, share some data collected since the launch, and provide an update on customer satisfaction progress. I'll hand it over to Namrata to continue the presentation.
Thank you, John. The initially low customer satisfaction score for the abandoned vehicle service on SJ311 was a driver for rethinking the way we deal with vehicle-related concerns in the city of San Jose. As part of reimagining the new vehicle concern service, the team made gradual operational and program enhancements to the then current abandoned vehicle service, which included expanding the extended parking stay enforcement pilot program. This change led to a gradual increase in customer satisfaction scores from 17% to 39% by March of this year. Since the launch of the new SJ311 Vehicle Concerns Service on March 28, 2024, the percentage of customers rating the abandoned vehicles program as good or very good, now integrated into the Vehicle Concerns Service delivery, has risen to 61% just in the first 5 months. Next slide, please. Previously, all vehicle-related issues reported through SJ311 under abandoned vehicles were manually triaged and directly integrated into DOT work streams. With the launch of the Vehicle Concerns Service, the system now automatically triages and routes service requests to one of the 5 city departments involved in Vehicle Concerns service delivery. This change means that customers no longer need to navigate complex city processes to receive assistance from the appropriate team. The project team invested significant time in designing a new intake form that captures only the essential information needed by various service teams to make reports actionable. On the current slide, you can see how the community utilizes the SJ311 application to report vehicle-related concerns. Service requests are sent to the triage hub, which triages and routes them to the appropriate city team. The city team then investigates the request and provides updates back to the triage hub. Based on user-provided information, the triage hub now checks for duplicate cases during the submission process. If an open case exists for the same license plate at the same location, users can opt to follow the existing case for updates, reducing duplicate efforts for the investigation team. Since the system's relaunch, we have 0 duplicates. The system has prevented duplicates 1,936 times. To enhance operational efficiency, the system identifies vehicles that have already been investigated and complied with warning notices, pausing further investigations on those vehicles for 60 days. Once a request is submitted, the new triage engine checks the license plate against the stolen vehicle list and automatically routes matches to the SJPD. Since its launch in March up to August end, the system has identified 125 reported vehicles as stolen and routed them to the police department. The triage hub also enables different departments to seamlessly transfer requests between one another. From launch to August 31st, 1,569 requests have been transferred. Additionally, the hub promotes transparency and facilitates end-to-end tracking of each report, ensuring that all teams are aligned throughout the process. I'm going to hand it off to Arian now to walk us through the next few slides.
Thank you, Namrata. Since the launch of the new Vehicle Concern Service and up to August 31st, 2024, we have received 20,077 reports, which have been triaged and directed to teams across 5 city departments. Of these reports, 84%, or nearly 17,000 reports, were routed to the Department of Transportation under the Abandoned Vehicle, Extended Parking, or Illegal Parking programs, each featuring their own workflows, response timeline, outcomes, and customer satisfaction ratings. It is worth noting that the illegal parking reports, which can range from reports of vehicles parked in red zones, blocking fire hydrants, vehicles encroaching on bike lanes or near crosswalks, do not result in an on-demand deployment of parking compliance teams. Rather, the information is aggregated and analyzed to enhance our parking officer deployments. DOT recently used the roughly 3,000 illegal parking reports to identify 4 areas with concentrated reports of illegal parking to deploy teams during days or times which were not previously heavily patrolled, with the goals of encouraging changes in parking behavior. DOT will continue to monitor illegal parking reports and make operational adjustments as resources allow. Through vehicle concerns, the Housing Department has received 1,886 reports regarding lived-in vehicles and collaborates with outreach providers to connect with the residents, where they can offer basic hygiene supplies, snacks, and personalized resource referrals based on individual needs. Finally, teams in BSJ, SJPD, and Code receive reports to address various issues. BSJ handles vehicle-related trash and biowaste cleanup, SJPD deals with reports of crime and stolen vehicles, and the Code team manages private property concerns. Next slide, please. This slide highlights data across the top 3 requested services under SJ311 Vehicle Concerns programs. First is the Abandoned Vehicle Program, which takes in public reports of vehicles exhibiting specific characteristics, such as missing or shattered windows, on jacks or blocks, missing wheels and tires, and inoperable vehicles as defined by the California Vehicle Code, and are investigated as potentially abandoned vehicles, which resulted in 2,379 reports. Additionally, DOT parking compliance officers initiated 3,390 abandoned vehicle investigations during citywide proactive patrols. Between March and August, DOT investigated and closed out 97% of vehicle abatement cases, resulting in the towing of 1,285 vehicles, equating to a 23% tow rate. The bottom left chart highlights the efficiency of the Abandoned Vehicle Program, which sees the majority of cases closed in 10 or fewer days. As noted previously, customer satisfaction in the Abandoned Vehicle Program has improved to 61% of customers rating the service as good or very good. Next is the Extended Parking Stay Enforcement Program, which was originally developed and resourced as a pilot to investigate up to 10,000 annual reports of vehicles being stored on public streets for extended periods, at least 10 days. Through the initial 5 months through August, the EPS program has received nearly 8,000 reports and is on pace to receive nearly 20,000 reports this fiscal year. Through August 2024, EPS investigations have resulted in the issuance of 425 parking citations and the towing of only 11 vehicles. These outcomes demonstrate that most vehicle owners move their vehicles independently or are responsive to warning notices. The overall tow enforcement rate of vehicles investigated through the EPS program is less than 1% and much lower than the tow rate of the Abandoned Vehicle Program of 23%. The increasing volume of EPS service requests has begun to outpace resources, resulting in turnaround timelines that extend beyond the 21-day closeout goal, which is illustrated in the lower middle chart. Notably, EPS customer satisfaction ratings are being impacted by the extended timelines and low tow rate. Customer expectations and desired outcomes are not aligned with the EPS service deliveries, resulting in only 26% of customers rating the service as good or very good. As service request volumes continue to trend upward, it is expected that timeliness may continue to be impacted. Next, Housing has received 1,886 reports of lived-in vehicles, closed out roughly 53% of those reports, which has resulted in outreach being provided to 246 occupants of lived-in vehicles. Approximately 75% of those cases were closed within the 30-day goal as shown in the lower right chart. 29% of customers rated lived-in vehicle service as good or very good. Next slide.
On September 5th, ITD launched the new Vehicle Concerns Dashboard. Our updated approach to customer satisfaction now focuses on outcomes, timeliness, and communication, offering more actionable insights. This method also distinguishes between single department and multi-department responses to further improve understanding and responsiveness. The dashboard provides a comprehensive view of service request volumes and statuses, outcomes, and overall customer satisfaction. It also breaks down data by request type, average turnaround times, and satisfaction scores, all of which can be filtered by date, program, and council district. If you hover over any of the metrics displayed on the dashboard, you can see more granular information on the metric. Next slide, please. On page 2 of this dashboard, you see the Vehicle Concerns Outcomes map. A user can input a location on the search bar on top, and the map shows vehicle concern outcomes in the area. Next slide, please.
Since the launch of the Vehicle Concerns System, Teams have continued to monitor the system's performance, identify and address system defects, and are working on refinements to the system and dashboards. Moving forward, teams across the 5 city departments will continue to monitor and respond to SJ 311 Vehicle Concern Service request, with our next report out on the Vehicle Concerns body of work to T&E occurring in May of 2025. Finally, acknowledging the City Council and community's continued emphasis on the importance of mitigating the impacts of oversized and lived-in vehicles parked on city streets, culminating with the adoption of the fiscal year 2024-25 budget, which included the oversized vehicle regulation pilot as outlined in the manager's budget addendum number 16. As the lead, DOT staff has been busy standing up this new program, including hiring additional staff, and is currently in the process of inventorying public streets across the entire city to identify oversized vehicles, those over 6 feet tall or 7 feet wide, oversized vehicles which are presumed to be lived in, typically RVs and trailers, and regular vehicles that are presumed to be lived in. Though modest in scale, the fiscal year 24-25 budget allows for the prioritization of 30 sites to provide engagement and outreach to encourage voluntary movement of vehicles and connection with resources, and enforcement of temporary towaway zones when needed to facilitate street cleaning, sweeping, debris removal, and waste disposal. DOT anticipates the first sites will be addressed beginning in January 2025 under this new program and continuing through the fiscal year with the goal to address 30 sites across the city. Next slide. This concludes the presentation, and staff is available for questions.
Thank you so
Jared,
much.
Just wanted to also mention
sorry.
that Jim Bursig is here, Assistant CIO with ITD as well. He's on the panel.
Okay, thank you so much. Do we have any public comment on this item?
We have no public comment.
Okay, then we'll have Councilmember Candelas kick us off.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to start off by thanking staff for your presentation, and I know the work that's gone into trying to improve this process for our residents has been not easy, to say the least. So kudos to you, and you know, the jump from 17% overall to 61%, a 250% jump in satisfaction is a testament to the innovative approach that we're taking to this. So I did want to acknowledge that. Obviously, one of the biggest issues that I'm having is how can we provide more feedback to our residents in those cases or those 311 requests that basically fall through the cracks. And so I guess my question for staff is, what kind of redundancies do we have in place given, 20,000 individual cases or individual requests on 311 to make sure that we follow up on most, if not all of them?
We have a system where the system automatically tracks reports that did not go through or did not get into in progress in the timeline that was specified. And we get regular updates on that, and we help the teams follow up with the teams and make sure that the tickets are going through. Once the ticket is in the queue for the department, then the process is pretty automated, and the reporting party gets all the updates as they are designed.
So as part of the triage hub, do we have staff monitoring that hub and seeing like individual requests, or are we just spotting the outliers and then, or walk me through that? Is that what you're speaking to, or?
Yes, that's what I'm speaking to. So at the moment we have periodically we are reviewing it and manually doing that check, but we're also in the process of setting up automated processes so that it runs as an automated process, and every time something does not go through as expected, it sends alerts to the administrators.
Got it. Okay. Because I know I've talked to a lot of folks who, express certain frustrations, like, they were probably part of the percentage where it was 28 or more days or 30 or more days where they haven't. Maybe I'm assuming staff is still working on those requests. What happens after 30 plus days?
Staff continues to work the cases regardless of how long. We try to endeavor to close those gaps as much as possible, aligning other resources as they're available to triage more cases.
Okay, so is there like a process for going back to, if it's 30 plus days, do we go back to like the beginning for those cases, like checking back in proactively with folks, or are we just doing it, if somebody sends another email, because the reason I ask that is I know residents forward me the 311 ticket response, and then I follow up with staff, and that usually helps get a response sooner than later. But barring a council office like mine, I mean, what kind of processes do we have as a city to help with that issue? Do we have one?
Trying to coalesce the question into, so it's not necessarily first in, first out. We are triaging, we're in the field working cases. If there's one across the street, we don't just drive by it. So we're working cases geographically as well as reported timelines. So to answer the question, they're in our queue. When we'll get to them, if there's something that's way, way out and there's an inquiry on it, then sure, it may percolate up the chain just based on an inquiry. I know individually the council office staffs all have access into that back end to view the status of cases so that you can kind of proactively internally triage something to just say, oh, we're seeing that it's been touched and we'd expect X, Y, and Z, or we're available for questions.
No, that's great. And I mean, by no means this is an easy question to answer. That's why I'm posing it, right? And so thank you for that. So I guess the next part, I know as part of the oversized vehicle regulations pilot that we're launching in January of this year, I'm assuming how we deal with the tow issue and just the sheer cost of that. We're going to be addressing that in that pilot, because I've heard from a few of the towers in our city that that's not really addressed. So they're having some difficulties with trying to figure out how it pencils out, because this problem is apparently booming or exploding. And so I'm curious to hear staff's feedback on that.
You may have a couple of questions embedded in all of that, but so yes, we're underway right now implementing the first phases of the oversized vehicle program, and we don't consider it a pilot. It has been funded by council, so we're working on standing up a whole new program and then implementing it. And yes, we think that the first abatements under that will probably occur in the January timeframe. And then part of your question was about the issues with tow. And right now the tow contractor are being transitioned to the police department to manage under a different kind of system. We're trying to get that up and ready to go to be prepared for when we start needing to abate those oversized vehicles. So hopefully all that is going to be working correctly when that is ready to go in January. There is currently tows for sedan-sized vehicles going on right now,
right.
But we know that there is a new challenge when we have oversized vehicles like RVs.
Rightfully, thanks.
Yes, and I'll just add a little bit to that. Kip Harkness, Deputy City Manager, was just in a conversation with the various and sundry folks in the City Manager's office who are involved in this, and as John Ristow remarked, with the shift over to PD, Jennifer Shimbry and others are working to support PD and making sure that we're able to have all of the towing resources actually work on these oversized vehicles and these lived-in vehicles. There's quite a bit of complexity, especially with the lived-in vehicles, in terms of their everything from their belongings to the gasoline and how they're stored and cleaned up. But we will be hoping to come forward with solutions to that, so that as we move into this implementation of the council-directed work around oversized and lived-in vehicles, we will have a tow solution in hand.
Great, thank you, Kip. I appreciate that. And this is by no means something that's easy to do, but I think we're going in the right direction with the changes in the process improvements, especially the constant communication, that dialogue with our resident. I think that's key in order for us to avail their concerns that we're not working on it, we're not listening. So I appreciate staff's work on this, and with that, I'll move acceptance of the staff report.
All right, thank you for the motion. Now we'll move on to Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you, Chairman. First off, I just want to appreciate the collaboration of multiple departments to create a more responsive vehicle concerns process. I know I mentioned this at our last T&E meeting, but to say that vehicle blight and abandoned vehicles is a concern of my office is an understatement. It's probably one of the main concerns raised by my constituents. Just to give you an example, my staff went out this Friday to do a district audit, which is when you drive around and identify issues in the district so you can report it to different departments. They were able to inspect 5 different neighborhoods. In those 5 different neighborhoods, they found 20 plus abandoned cars or broken down cars on the street, right? And I think it may not be this case in every single district, but that's the reality that we see in Eastside San Jose. So I'm excited to hear that there may be the case for more proactive illegal parking enforcement or vehicle concerns reporting, because I don't know if any other office has to send their staff out to do this, but it's something, unfortunately, that my staff has been proactive about. What neighborhoods? I hear there's going to be 4 neighborhoods that are going to have this proactive approach. Do we know where that's going to be?
You're speaking to the illegal parking reports that we then looked at the data set. We identified 4 areas across, one in your council district, Florence Avenue, was one that had a high propensity for reporting illegal parking activity in overnight hours. Mm-hmm. It's not often hit by the officers in the overnight hours, so we are proactively looking at some deployments to try and encourage some parking changes.
Okay, that makes sense. I appreciate you guys looking into that. I think there may come a time where we realize that what works for the whole city may not work for every single district. Each community is unique, and I'm hoping that my community, my residents, they don't deserve to suffer from this vehicle blight. They pay rent, they've purchased their homes, they work just as hard, if not harder, than a lot of people in this city. And so I'm going to continue to work with this office, but I'm hoping to see that we can move the needle forward for my residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I also want to thank you for the report, and I think that 60% satisfaction is obviously a big improvement. I really am concerned about the extended parking stay, and it's not about the tows, it's about the low satisfaction rate. I happen to have a beta, I shouldn't even say a beta tester anymore. He used to be a beta tester, but my husband, when he's walking the dog, reports, he uses 311 every single day. And there have been vehicles that he's reported as having been in place too long that are maybe don't have broken windows, but are definitely either not operable or are a visual nuisance. And so when you say that you have had 7,971 cases, but only 425 parking citations, and you've closed about 7,500 cases on those extended parking stays, what does that mean? Like, when you go by, if they're still there, what happens?
So it's multi-visits result in an action, so we use contracted staff to do the initial and follow-up, and then on a 3rd visit is when a parking enforcement officer will write a citation and or start initiating the tow process.
Okay, can you tell me what happens on each of those visits?
So the first visit, if the vehicle is in its reported location, they'll mark it in its spot, so often like the chalk marks that you'll see on the tire. A subsequent visit after so many days, 2nd visit, then looks for those same marks in the same spot, on the same street, in the same exact location. If it's there, then that's in the queue for a parking compliance officer who's authorized to actually write citations, to write a citation and initiate a tow, because at that point in time it's been so many days that it could be presumed to potentially be abandoned. So then we'll tag it for towing. A 4th visit would result in a tow. The sheer numbers of 425 sites and 11 tows out of 7,000 cases, most often then they're moved after that initial chalk mark.
So there's a chalk mark, and is there any note on the car?
No.
And the second time someone's checking the chalk mark, if it's still there, is there any note on the car?
No.
Okay. And so from the time that somebody reports to the time of the first chalk mark, what is the average time that it takes to even investigate
I think
and
I'm about to be
get an
corrected
initial
here.
chalk mark?
Please, correct me.
No, try again.
Thank you.
Heather Hoshi, Deputy Director with Department of Transportation over parking. There is a note, so it's the same note we use in the abandoned vehicle process. It's the orange note or the bright pink note that identifies that this vehicle may be in violation of several different towable offenses or ordinances. So they do get the same notice when we chalk the tires to let them know that they need to move that vehicle. If on the return visit, the vehicle does not show movement, in other words, those tire marks are still intact, tire to ground, or the valve stem on the tire has moved, then it's deemed in compliance. Remember, it can move a few feet, or it can move and drive around the block and park in the exact same location. It is still in compliance with just movement.
So what is the time that it takes from the time someone reports to the time of the initial chalk mark? Because I just am suspecting that that is where the dissatisfaction comes from.
So for the extended parking stay, the goal is to respond and close out vehicles within 21 days of receiving the complaint. So depending on the volume of open cases, the amount of follow-up visits that are required, all of those things, the number of staff that we have on through the contractor, those things kind of impact the timeliness from our first visit, from receipt to our first visit.
Okay, so is that on that slide, the tiny bar graph, is that the
Yes.
number? Okay.
That's the closeout timing.
That's the closeout time.
So that would be the total amount of time it took from receipt to final disposition on the case.
Okay, so in this bar graph, what's the average?
I don't have the average. Just
Okay.
looking at it, it's probably over 21 days, just looking at the sheer volume, given the number of cases in 21 to 25 and beyond.
That's what I'm thinking too, is that it's somewhere past 2 weeks, for sure.
On the dashboard itself, I could pull it up.
So on the overall dashboard, there is customer service is broken down into 3 specific areas. One is communication, one is timeliness, and one is outcomes. So the impact of those 3 items on our customer service rating should be displayed and broken down on that outcomes dashboard. So we can see of those 3 items, what is impacting the customer service rating? Are they okay with our outcomes, meaning in this case, probably the vehicle isn't being towed very often, or are they more upset with the timeliness it took for us to get it to resolution, or are they upset with our communications not being up to par? The dashboard.
I'm pulling it up right now.
Okay. No, that's okay. I can look it up.
Can I just ask a follow-up question on that,
Yeah,
just while you're on
please.
it? This graph that shows the dates, is that turnaround time to complete to the end of the process when the whole case is closed? It's not for the first visit, right?
That's correct. That's the entire time.
So that's the entire time from the first report to closure?
Correct. From the tape we received it, so it was submitted by the constituent or the customer to the time we closed it out and finished all of our activity on that report.
Okay, thank you. I think some of the frustration is that when people see a car, or any vehicle obviously, but see a vehicle there that is either a large vehicle, and this doesn't only apply to RVs. We've had a couple of people who have had the equivalent of like a food truck parked in front of their house that was just a trailer, but not an actual vehicle, parked in front of their house and then just literally drove it around the block and parked it in front of the exact same house again, and they're not able to report it for another 60 or 90 days. I can't remember what it is. that causes frustration. When there's a vehicle that isn't drivable and stays there for 2 months, that causes a ton of frustration. And so I see that you're closing out the requests, but you're only citing a very, very small number of requests. And I heard it from Councilmember Ortiz on the other side of the city, that there is this frustration that even if they move, they're not moving far and they're still ticking people off. So what can we do about that?
You want me to take it? Yeah, maybe just to sort some of that out. So we did hear the frustration of our process that we built for the new remade service. We purposely put in that time frame so that that a person was not able to apply for or re-cite an additional vehicle, the same one. We heard that before, and I think we're going to take a look at how long that time frame between reporting is. So that's one. The fact that the vehicles are moving means that has to start over. And probably Heather can explain the California Vehicle Code, but when that vehicle moves, that whole process has got to start all over. So that's a very tough one to deal with, but that's what we're having to build that system around. But once they move, it starts over. And then the third one, I think, was just some of the time frames from start to finish, and then we close it out, and there's still some frustration. So I think what the point that the staff was trying to get across is that many of these vehicles that are being reported under extended stay are being moved. They are being used. Obviously, there are some that don't fit that mold, but many of them are moving. So when we expend a lot of time to go out there, they've moved. Someone's using them. Those vehicles are being used and moved regularly.
I guess one thing I would say is if it's a trailer or a food truck trailer that's only being used on the weekends and is being parked in front of someone's house, blocking their view of the street, that maybe we can think about how that might need to be treated, because it's a business vehicle as opposed to a personal vehicle, and it's clearly a business vehicle. I'm just going to put that out there because there are other like landscaping trucks that are big like that. And so I just think we need to think about, again, this is happening on the east side and it's happening on the west side. It's happening everywhere, where people are really upset that there seems to be a plethora of vehicles and people are not using them frequently enough to make a difference in people's perceptions.
Yeah, that's okay. No, I appreciate those comments, and I mean, I guess there's a question about our own codes and what kind of things we should allow and shouldn't allow, as opposed to this process, which is specifically about vehicles that are not moved, right? I mean, so clearly there's people who move their car every day and park in exactly the same spot, and the person who lives there doesn't like the fact that somebody's vehicle is there. It might be unsightly, or it just might be someone else's car. We hear that too. And of course, the type of vehicle comes into play in that, but doesn't necessarily, we have to make sure our codes are there to describe the kinds of vehicles we're going to allow to park in certain places, right? Is that a fair
I might need some help on the code and the types of vehicles. That may not be available either, but Heather might know what the California Vehicle Code requires.
Yes, the California Vehicle Code related to the kind of storage on street, 72 hours, doesn't take into consideration the type of vehicle, so it's unilaterally across all types. There is a restriction for parking vehicles over 10,000 pounds. I'm not sure if a food truck rises to that level, but we can definitely look into it. And if they're parked in a residential area, it's eligible for citation, not a tow.
Don't we have a policy about, for example, you can't park your boat on the street, it has to be perpendicular to your house? There's certain policies the city puts in place about where you can store certain kinds of vehicles, and in theory, we could expand that to cover other types of vehicles. Is that true?
There isn't necessarily a vehicle type restriction across the city.
It's a size.
There are some some specific items related or specific restrictions related to some characteristics, like over 10,000 feet. Being perpendicular means you can't block an obstruction, you can't be an obstruction to oncoming traffic, so that's any vehicle as well. But I'd like to point out too, Arian mentioned it in his presentation, the oversized vehicle inventory that is happening throughout the city. I'd like to highlight that that's not just lived-in vehicles, that's also oversized vehicles. So we are capturing semis, food trucks, anything that's wider than 7 feet, taller than 6 feet. So those types of vehicles are being inventoried and will be used, that data set will be used to kind of review all overall kind of enforcement practices and what we're doing, in addition to wrapping it into the oversized lived-in vehicle program.
Does it have to meet both of those criteria or just
No,
one?
either or.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Makes sense. All right, Councilmember Foley.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation and for the improved positive response in some of the reports. This is an area that we get comments from our constituents in every part of the district. The residents believe that they own the streets, and the street in front of them should be kept for their vehicles. So when they see something that doesn't belong there, that's maybe an unsightly vehicle, it disturbs their peace and quiet enjoyment of their house. So we get these phone calls all the time, as evidenced by the interest in this topic by the council. I have, and most of my questions have been asked, but I do have a couple of questions for you regarding the oversized vehicle program that we're getting ready to launch. Like Councilmember Candelas, I too have heard from the towing companies about towing large vehicles, and they're hesitant to do so. So as we look at that program, are we looking at providing them with incentives or considering incentives to tow the vehicles? Will that be part of the consideration?
I'm not the expert here. I know that City Manager's Office is coordinating that entire transition of the contract police department and how to handle these oversized vehicles when the tows are requested.
Heather knows.
And Heather might.
Or
Heather is on.
Heather has
Heather's
an
on the
opinion.
task force. She might be able to answer that. But the quick answer is yes. That's being considered.
Okay.
So the challenge we are facing right now is we're transitioning to a new model from our previous kind of tow contract model. In our previous or existing, the city is contracting individually with various tow companies that are towing in certain areas. Our new model will consolidate that, and we will not be contracting directly with the tow companies, but we will have a tow administrator, and that administrator will be responsible for ensuring that those tows happen. And it won't matter, we won't be restricted by this tow company only serves this tow zone. And so we will now have more in our toolbox, more tow companies in our toolbox to address individual tow refusals that are happening. And hopefully with the structure of the new contract with the new vendor, they will reduce the number of tow refusals because it will now be the responsibility of the administrator, not individual tow companies.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. We've also heard about the capacity to store and where they're going to store the vehicles and the cost to store. So I'm sure that will be in consideration as well.
Yeah, that's part of Kip Harkness, again, Deputy City Manager, that's part of what we're working out, kind of the whole customer journey line, if you will, and making sure that we've taken into account the storage, the cleaning, and all of those aspects so that we have a successful ability to move these vehicles off the street. And we also will potentially need to be shifting some funds around to be able to accommodate this, but we think within the direction that you've given us in the budget that we have the ability to do that as it relates to lived-in vehicles.
Okay. Great, thank you. That's really all the questions I had. The rest were answered already. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Heather and Kip, for that clarification. That's helpful to know about the more flexibility that we'll have in the next contract than we currently have. I want to just first start by thanking you for this report. We've come a long way in 2 years since I remember having this conversation, well, more than 2 years ago, but the the improvements in the process are evident. Also, the reporting is really great. I don't know if my colleagues went to the dashboard and clicked on page 2 to see the map and actually look at the map. It's really instructive to see the map. In fact, I don't know whether somebody can put that up on the screen and share it, but if you zoom around and look, you'll see some of the density of where reports are is somewhat surprising, first of all. Second of all, it's really interesting to be able to see a blue dot and know that that means there was a report made and no citation or tow, but the orange dots are where actual citations happen, and it's interesting to be able to actually see that visually. Am I to gather from this map that a blue dot means that the vehicle probably had some movement between the start of the process and the end? Is that what this pretty much means, is that if we started the process on this vehicle, but by the time the process was over before the citation, the vehicle had moved?
Correct, yeah, there was just no violation found, meaning that it moved.
It moved, right? I mean, the violation is not moving, so therefore the only solution is, okay, so all these vehicles are reported, people don't like that they're there, they perceive that they're not moving, but again, it could be somebody who's using their vehicle every day and parking it in the same spot. When the person comes home from work, it's always there, doesn't mean that it was there all day, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see, I had a couple other questions. Oh, I see that a higher percentage of your reports are staff generated from proactive patrol. Does that go into the system differently, or does it become another report just like the ones from the public?
Yeah, I mean, they're in the system just as a self-initiated case, we'll call it.
And so obviously when we do the satisfaction report at the end, those are not included in the satisfaction report because those are initiated internally?
Correct.
Okay. And then we talked about the system preventing duplicates. So if somebody reports and there's an open case, does that mean just duplicates regarding an open case or even a case that had been closed previously? So once the case is closed, if someone then resubmits the same thing, does it become a new report?
So we go ahead and if it's an open case, it'll flag it as a duplicate and a person has an option to follow the request. So they'll get all updates on the case that happened from that point on. But if it's a case that was closed within the last 60 days, then it will not allow reporting of that vehicle again.
I see.
Stating that, it's not eligible for being
I see. So it's not
reported.
eligible at that same vehicle and location until 60 days later, and then
Correct.
they can resubmit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Thank you. One thing that kind of surprised me and concerned me in the report was we talked about not having the resources within DOT to deal with illegal parking, and we're sort of you made a comment about we're informing future patrols based on that, but it even kind of implied that even if we have cars that are blocking bike lanes and crosswalks, we're not able to react to them. Is that true, or are we reacting differently to certain kinds of violations?
No, those instances that you mentioned, crosswalks, red zones, fire hydrants, all those, we do not send out proactive or reactive services for those. If they're blocking your driveway and you're unable to pull in or pull out, we will, that's a completely separate channel, but reactive services are in the vehicle abatement, abandoned vehicle, and extended parking.
I guess I kind of confused by your answer. We do not send out for those violations?
Do not, no. So a bike lane block, do not. A red curb, a fire hydrant, and the likes.
So perhaps you could tell us how we actually handle those so we're clear?
So we take that data in, and then periodically we are analyzing that data, finding hot spots. And when you input a case, you're asked, what day of the week, what time of day does the occurrence typically happen? And then we're taking all of that data and making some limited tweaks to enforcement personnel, hours, days, times, to try and catch those violators so that we can issue citations and change that behavior. So in the cases that I mentioned where we deployed in 4 kind of key hotspots, it was about 25 to 30% of the 3,000 cases were in these pocketed areas. Most were in the overnight hours, and we're going to be deploying officers systematically in some overnight hours to try and change that behavior.
So we think that we've made a difference there. I mean, it's weird for me to hear that if there was a car parked in front of a fire hydrant that was reported to our system, that nobody goes out to make sure the car's not in front of the fire hydrant. And it also concerns me if people are trying to use bike lanes and can't use them, and we're saying we're not actively going out and checking on that. So I guess I'm just sort of still a little bit concerned by that answer.
Yeah, we just do not have the personnel for thousands of cases of those type of violations to send out reactive services.
Okay. Okay, thank you for the answer. I guess we'll keep the conversation going, I'm sure. All right, well, thank you so much for that. We had a motion and a second. Are there any other comments from anyone, or should we move to a vote?
Just one comment. I'm a little lagging behind. Councilmember Ortiz, I think you were talking about the density of oversized and lived-in vehicles in your neighborhood. I think, if I've understood the methodology correctly, what the Department of Transportation is doing now, and please correct me if I misspeak, is they're doing a systematic survey, essentially unit of the city by unit of the city. When they're done with that, what they're going to be doing is recommending which areas and have should be targeted for abatement of those vehicles. They'll have the ability to do about 30, maybe a little bit more sites, and the criteria that they will be using will be include a number of different criteria, but we'll look at where the areas are most impacted. So it won't be just a each council district gets X number. They will take into account the realities in the neighborhood, so where you have the greater densities and level of impact. So I think we'll be bringing those back to you as we make those recommendations, but I wanted to be clear, at least if my understanding is correct, that the approach to larger oversized vehicles and lived-in vehicles should very much take into account the questions of density. We still won't have enough resources to do them all, but we will be able to target 30 key spots across the city based on where the problems really are.
And so just to thank you, Kip, for that. Appreciate that update. And is this, just so that I know, is it only for lived-in vehicles, or is it also abandoned vehicles as well? And lived-in vehicles and large vehicles?
Go ahead.
So our inventory as a component of the MBA 16 body of work is identifying 3 types of vehicles, if you will. Oversized, which is just the definition, 6 feet tall, 7 feet wide. Oversized and lived in, which I think is the biggest issue, if you will. Those are the lived-in RVs, trailers, and such. And then we are also trying to capture, to the best of our ability, regular vehicles that are presumed to be lived in, because we know that when there's congregations of RVs and such, there's typically 1, 2, 3 regular vehicle mixed into that, so that we can take that in totality and identify just the impacts, not just of oversized vehicles as a definition, but lived-in vehicles.
Thank you.
I thought that your way you were answering the question was more about general vehicle concerns and identifying areas of high concern.
No, this is a good clarification. It is the body of work is specifically looking at the combination of oversized vehicles and lived-in vehicles, and then we'll be coming back with identifying about 30 areas where we will be able to do engagement and hopefully clear those areas, and then keep those areas cleared for a longer term.
Yeah, and that's a whole, I think that's a kind of a separate conversation from today, because there's a lot I could say on that. I know, for example, we've identified a couple of streets where we've talked to departments about the most impacted streets in our district. Unfortunately, what happens is one incident occurs on that street, the police show up, and they all move to another street 2 blocks over, and so the inventory becomes outdated very quickly. So we'll have to have that conversation about what an area means, because an area should be wider than a specific street, because we just had a street with 15 RVs on it in my district that I drove by this morning. There's 4 left because there was an incident and everyone moved to another street. So I'm very concerned about that, but a little beyond the scope of today's discussion. But thank you for the report, and let's move to a vote. All right, that motion carries 5-0, and now we're on to open forum. Do we have any public comment?
Yes, we have one public comment.
We have a public comment for Harry Neal. You can make your way down to the podium. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Harry Neal. I'm a local transit advocate, but most of you already know that by now. I'd like to speak to something that is not on the agenda. I'm frankly disappointed because the goals that the city of San Jose has set out for carbon neutrality and environmental responsibility are very ambitious, but realistically, under our current efforts, we are not going to meet them. We are still too car dependent. which not only hampers our emissions reduction capacity, it also means that it will be extremely difficult for us to build the necessary housing that we need to end our housing crisis. Our transit is poor in a lot of ways, not only due to lack of funding, as is, well, with most of America, but also because from what I understand, the city does not support it in the way that it should. There are some great things that the city is doing to help support transit, like the citywide transit signal priority. I think that's a fantastic policy. However, there are other things that the city doesn't do that would be extremely impactful, such as light rail preemption, where the trains would be able to interrupt signals and have crossing gates to make them be able to speed through intersections so they never get caught in a delay. That kind of thing is done around the country in other systems in other countries, and it makes their transit much, much more effective, specifically for rail. That is something we absolutely need to adopt here in San Jose. Thank you.
Thank you, and back to the committee.
Okay, thank you so much. We are adjourned at 2:51 p.m.